Hi everyone, this is for 8th grade English. This is going to introduce Unit 6 on pronouns. We are skipping over Unit 5. We had just wrapped up the end of Unit 4, modifiers, in school the last time we met. And instead of assessing you on Unit 4 now virtually, I'm going to go ahead and wait till we get back to school to go ahead and do that. But I mentioned to you that we'd still continue learning about different grammar lessons while we were outside of school. So here we are at the beginning of Unit 6. Unit 6 is going to be entirely about pronouns. So the same way we started Unit 4, modifiers, with a definition of a modifier, let's go ahead and begin with the general definition of a pronoun. Now, if you know what a pronoun is, you know that it is a word that replaces a noun. Nouns, of course, are person, place, thing, or idea. Okay, so a pronoun is any word that replaces a noun. Okay, we have two types of pronouns, and no cheating looking up here to figure out what the names are, but those two types of there we go, just give you the answer. Those two types of pronouns include personal pronouns and possessive pronouns. Okay? Personal pronouns. A personal pronoun is a pronoun such as they and them that replaces the name or names of a particular noun. For instance, Sally likes to go to the beach, but she doesn't like to go into the water. Okay? She, in this case, would be a personal pronoun referring to one particular person. There's only one she. She also tells us the gender of the person that we are addressing. We know she is feminine. So those are just some of the aspects of what personal pronouns can indicate. Personal pronouns indicate the person, number, and gender of the noun or nouns being replaced. Okay, in this case, one Sally. Now, if I were to go ahead and have more than one person, say Sally and Bob went to the park, I would no longer say she. If I want to talk about both Sally and Bob being the subject of the sentence, I would say Sally and Bob went to the park where they shared ice cream together. Okay? Two examples of personal pronouns there in that case. She, they, there's several more. Let me go ahead and give you those to you now. We separate personal pronouns into first person, singular, a second person singular, third person singular, first person plural, second person plural, and third person plural. Okay? So let's go ahead and take a look at what those personal pronouns are. If we're talking about first person, you are the speaker. On a singular sense, it means it's just you. So if you're addressing yourself, you're either going to use I or you're going to use me. Now, second person refers to a conversation between you and another person. So if there's only just one other person besides you, you're going to go ahead and use you. Third person, you are no longer part of it. You are talking about people or a particular person that does not include you in the mix. Say, third person, think about it in when we're talking about a fiction story, a third person point of view, that the speaker is a narrator that is not part of the story, kind of observing things from a distance. If we're only talking about one third person pronoun, we're going to use words like he, okay, or him. Or on the other hand, we're going to use words like she or her, okay? Or on the other hand, we're going to use a word like it, okay? Either if we're talking about an inanimate object, or in the case of, something like an animal, where possibly the gender is unknown. Now, if we're talking about first person, but now you've got yourself, but there's someone else included in the mix, your pronouns are we and us, okay? Second person plural, possibly the easiest one, second person in general, because whether or not it's just you and the other person, or there's more than one person, you're still addressing one other person in second person, it's always going to be you. Now, when we're talking about third person plural, there's more than one he, or there's more than one she, or there's a mix of he's and she's, we're going to go ahead and use either they or them, okay? And that wraps up personal pronouns, okay? You know that singular refers to one, plural refers to many. First person is the person who is speaking. Second person shows who is being spoken to. Third person shows someone or something that is being spoken about, okay? And in terms of gender in pronouns, we say that they can either be feminine, such as she, her, masculine, he and him, and we use the word neuter to describe it when the gender is unknown, okay? Now, possessive pronouns are pronouns that replace possessive nouns. We talked about possessive nouns back in Unit 2. If you remember what a possessive noun was, a possessive noun is a noun that shows ownership. So similarly, a possessive pronoun also show ownership. Only they're just replacing an actual noun. So if we were to say, for example, that is Ben's laptop, another way of saying it would be, it is his laptop, where his actually happens to be a possessive pronoun, and we actually have it over here, neuter pronoun, being referred to the laptop. Okay? Let me give you another example. Carl and I can't think of a name right now. Wow. Vicky's car is parked up front. Their car is a red Toyota. Not the same as my car. Their, in this case, is also a possessive pronoun. Notice how we're using their as T-H-E-I-R. Okay? We're not using T-H-E-Y apostrophe R-E, and we're not using their T-H-E-R-E. This is a common error in the English language. Okay? There is pointing to a particular place. I want you to go over there. There is a possessive pronoun, which is what we're talking about right now. And there is a contracted form of they are. So they are swimming. Okay. Another common misconception with a possessive pronoun use would be the case of your. This is your book. Okay. Your is a possessive pronoun. Not to be confused with your, U''re, which is a contracted form of you are. You are beginning to get the hang of this, hopefully. Okay. Another one. It's possessive pronoun. The dog lost its collar. The dog lost its collar. Its belongs to the dog. We wouldn't say it's like this, which is a contracted form of anyone. Anyone? No hands up. A contracted form of it is. Okay? So these are the most common misconceptions when it comes to possessive pronouns. Personal pronouns a bit easier to remember. I would need for you guys to remember all of these ahead of the next quiz that we're going to have on this unit, your first quiz for Unit 6. You need to definitely memorize all of these pronouns. When it comes to possessive pronouns, really try to study these misconceptions. Okay, let's go ahead and label these as common misconceptions. Okay, if I can turn all of this into a PDF afterwards, I will definitely go ahead and do that and send that your way. Okay, so that wraps up lesson 1. And if anybody has any questions about lesson 1, feel free to pause the video at this time. We're about 12 minutes in. Go back, look over the notes. Feel free to have taken screenshots. Feel free to have taken notes in your notebook. I'm going to hold you accountable, though, to be able to acquire all of this information, as it will be pertinent to know ahead of your next workbook assignment, which I'll probably have to assign electronically, as well as your next grammar quiz, which, like I mentioned before, may or may not be electronic. Haven't decided yet how we're going to get to that. Okay, so that's the end of lesson 1. So let's go ahead and jump into lesson 2. There we go. Okay, so lesson 2 is titled Pronoun Antecedents. Okay. Oh, that sounds like a challenging word. It's actually not. All right. Just changing the font here. Okay. So what we already just said in lesson 1, pronouns take the place of a noun. Okay. One more example, just to have fun. Diego read the newspaper. I can't write. Diego read the newspaper. He was looking for the new Peanuts comic. Okay. The noun, this is very important. The noun that the pronoun replaces is called an antecedent. So in this case, the antecedent for the sentence that I just gave you is Diego, because we have the pronoun over here, which is he, and the noun that he is replacing is Diego. Okay? So we call Diego the antecedent of the sentence. Okay? A little bit about the word antecedent. Ante, not anti. Ante means before, like the antechamber. Okay? And the Latin root sed means go. So literally, antecedent literally translates to go before. Now you might think, okay, easy to remember, antecedents always go then before the pronoun being referred to. Unfortunately, because English is complicated, that is not the case. Okay? An antecedent usually goes before a pronoun and names the person, place, thing to which the pronoun refers. Sometimes, however, the antecedent is in a separate sentence before the current one, and even sometimes the antecedent is after the pronoun that is replacing the noun. Okay? Fear not, Mr. G will explain. Okay? Let me give you some examples of antecedents coming before pronouns. The car is old, but it still runs just fine. It, pronoun, antecedent, car. Let's go ahead and write that down. It equals pro, car equals antecedent. Okay? Lucas listened to his radio. His, pronoun, Lucas, antecedent. Okay? The keys should be on the table. Did you find them there? Here's what I was talking about. We have two separate sentences. The keys should be on the table, period. Did you find them there? Question mark. We have a them in the second sentence. Them, as we mentioned before, is a pronoun. But what is them referring to? Them, given the context of the sentence before, would be referring to the keys. Did you find them there? The keys. Keys, therefore, is the antecedent. So as I mentioned, they could be in separate sentences. Now, let's go ahead and show you an example of a sentence where the pronoun actually comes first. Now, in the most common case that you would see this is in the case of a complex sentence. Complex sentences usually introduce the pronoun before the antecedent. Because a complex sentence, I know, it wants to be complex, it wants to be complicated. It, remember, begins with what we call a subordinate clause, which begins with a subordinating conjunction, which would use a pronoun, the second half of the sentence, before the antecedent instead of the pronoun appearing after the antecedent. So let's go ahead and give you an example of that. Although he was absent, comma, I can't think of names. Wow. Sam still managed to understand the lesson. Hopefully all of you guys will be a Sam with this lesson. He is the pronoun. He is the pronoun. And Sam is still called an antecedent. Even though antecedent means go before, we said by definition that a grammatical antecedent usually goes before pronoun, not always. So in this case, in the case of a complex sentence, we have the pronoun actually coming before the antecedent. Okay? Let me give you some more notes. Okay? Another important note. The antecedent of one pronoun may be another pronoun. Antecedents don't necessarily need to be proper nouns or common nouns. The antecedent could be another pronoun. Okay? An example being, by 6 o'clock, I, pronoun, had closed my computer. My is a pronoun referring to whom? I. I, in this case, would be the antecedent. Being the speaker of the sentence, I could be an antecedent because if I'm the one speaking it, I don't necessarily need to refer to myself by name. I could be just the one speaking, and if I'm telling you by 6 o'clock I had closed my computer, I don't need to refer to myself in the third person and say by 6 o'clock Mr. G had closed his computer. That would still be a grammatically correct sentence, but of course if I'm the one talking, I don't need to use my name. I could just use I, and in this case you have the pronoun my referring to the antecedent I, which would still be me. Again, don't have to use the name if I'm the one talking. Okay? The most important thing to remember for antecedents, and we're going to give this an extra star, okay? The most important thing to remember when it comes to antecedents is that antecedents must agree always with pronouns in terms of number and person. This is what we call pronoun antecedent agreement. Okay? They must agree in number, they must agree in person. If we are talking about gender, it must also agree there too. Okay? Masculine. Billy completed his assignment. We're choosing his because his agrees in terms of number, only one Billy. His agrees in terms of gender, Billy is a masculine name, and his agrees with the person that we're talking about. His goes along with a person, Billy is a person, or at least we hope so. Feminine, Evelina submitted her assignment to. Her would be the pronoun that is agreeing with the given antecedent, Evelina. Okay, now let's say we had the case of a neuter. Okay, the assignment is in its binder. Now, its here is a pronoun referring to the antecedent of an assignment. We can't give its any gender because an assignment is an inanimate thing, does not qualify to have a gender. So its and assignment happen to agree with each other. Okay? A couple more notes for you guys. When the antecedent is two or more nouns joined by the word and, use a plural pronoun. When the antecedent is two or more nouns that are joined by the word and, you use a plural pronoun. For example, Xander and Phil will give their presentation next week. There is a pronoun that agrees with the fact that we have two nouns being replaced, Xander and Phil. There is gender neutral. Let's say Xander happened to be a girl's name and we have girl and boy. We still can use there because there does not indicate the answer as to whether we're talking about a boy and a girl, if we're talking about two boys, if we're talking about two girls. Okay, So when the antecedent is two or more nouns joined by the word and, use the plural pronoun. When the antecedent is two or more nouns joined by the word or, use a pronoun that agrees with the noun that is closest to the pronoun. This is often forgotten in English. When you have one or the other, you need to choose the noun closest to that pronoun. We saw something similar when we covered subject-verb agreement. When we were choosing, say, a verb between two subjects, one or the other, one happened to be singular, one happened to be plural. If you remember, if the plural one were mentioned second, the verb agreed with the plural one because it was closer. This is only in the case of subjects joined by or. Please don't forget that. Subjects joined by and, you need to use plural because it's one and the other. At least two people, you require plural, two or more pronoun. Now, when it's one or the other, now this would be the case of X or Y, or either X or Y, or neither this nor that, neither an X nor Y. You're going to use a pronoun that agrees with the noun closest to the pronoun. This can get confusing in the case if we're talking about gender. Let's give you an example of that. Did Lisa or Carl bring his report? This is grammatically correct. Because we have or, and we have either Lisa, presumably feminine, and Carl, presumably masculine, we need to use his because the noun, the antecedent, closest to the word his is the word Carl. Carl is masculine, so we're choosing a masculine pronoun because Carl is closer. Now, if Lisa happened to be the closer one, did Carl or Lisa bring her report? Because now Lisa is closer to the pronoun, so we're choosing a pronoun closest to the antecedent. Okay? This even goes in the case of singular and plural nouns. Will the captain or the players bring their supplies? Now this sounds a little more easier to comprehend because even if we had and, we would still be using their, but we're only actually using a their because the word closest to there is players. Not to be confused with if this were an and, yes, this would still be a there, but we're only using this there because the antecedent closest to the word there happens to be a plural one. So let's say that the players were mentioned first. Will the players or the captain bring? Now before we go on to the pronoun, again, mind you, we're using an or, but now we have a singular antecedent closest to the pronoun that we're about to mention. So which kind of pronoun are we going to use? We're going to use a singular pronoun. Will the players or the captain bring his supplies? Again, assuming that the captain is a his, so is masculine, so we could even say her if the captain happens to be female. Okay? Final notes on antecedents. This now goes into the concept of clear antecedents, okay, or what we call pronoun clarity. Okay. The most important thing that Mr. G will tell you when it comes to writing with pronouns is that whenever you're in doubt between using a noun or a pronoun, if you ever have to second guess yourself, use a noun. It is better to be over-specific than it is to be under-specific and have the risk of using a pronoun when the reader or the person listening to you might not even be sure exactly which noun you're referring to. Let me give you an example of where lack of pronoun clarity becomes an issue in writing. So let's go ahead and say Sandra visited, I can't think of any names today. Sandra visited Wendy when she was in town. Sounds like a proper sentence, and in a way, grammatically it is, but we have a problem here. The question is, did Sandra visit Wendy when Sandra was in town? Or did Sandra visit Wendy when Wendy was in town? If you read that sentence again, because we have a she, and we have two feminine names, two feminine antecedents, we don't know who the she is referring to. Who is the one that left town? There's really no way of knowing. Did Sandra leave? Did Wendy leave? This is why it's so important to be very specific, to use pronoun clarity when you're writing, okay? It's better to use more nouns than it is to use more pronouns. So the correct form of this sentence would be Sandra visited Wendy when Sandra was in town. Also correct is Sandra visited Wendy. Mr. G can't spell. Look at him. Just put Wendy. Sandra visited Wendy when Wendy was in town. Also correct, to use a complex sentence, when Sandra was in town, she visited Wendy. Okay? You could even say that when Wendy was in town, she was visited by Sandra. Okay? Which would also be correct. Let's go ahead and add it. Okay, so you see how all four of these correct the question that we had up here. Okay, they clear up exactly who had left town. We now know who left town. We know who visited who. Things actually make sense. Okay. When it comes to your writing also, it's very easy to overuse the pronoun they. Let me give you an example of something you guys might find yourself saying, okay? Your favorite phrase to use, a lot of you, goes along the lines of this. They say. You love to use this. They say that the earth is getting hotter each year. A lot of you write like this. They say that the earth is getting hotter each year. Grammatically, correct sentence. You have a subject, you have a predicate. But again, who is they? We have no idea who you're talking about, okay? So again, it all comes back to pronoun clarity. When you're writing and you find yourself using a pronoun, you should know the answer to the pronoun that you're talking about. You should know the antecedent that would be replaced, that pronoun is replacing, Okay? If you don't know exactly who says that the Earth is getting hotter each year, you know what? The information probably doesn't belong in your essay. Because if you're talking to someone and let's say they ask you, oh yeah, who says that? Okay? You're going to end up sounding like you don't know what you're talking about if you tell them, well, they do, those people. Okay? Yeah, which people? Okay? So at the end of the day, you really want to make sure that the information that you provide can always be credited back to an antecedent that makes sense. Avoid the use of they in your writing if you don't know who they can be referring to. Okay, that wraps up lesson 2, which wraps up our grammar lesson for this video. So again, feel free to go back to any information you may have needed. Just going to do a quick little scroll here. Pause the video at any given point in time if you need any of this information. Took a lot of notes here. And if you have any questions about any of this material, I'm more than happy to go ahead and answer questions for you. Just feel free to go ahead and send me a message on Classcraft. Remember to slap that like button at the bottom of this video. Hit subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Really enjoying doing these videos for you guys as long as you're watching them. So stay tuned for the workbook pages that'll be assigning on this lesson. For now, this is Mr. G signing out. God bless you guys. Have a great day. Bye-bye.